You're watching Studio Ken. Make sure you don't miss any episode of Studio Ken by subscribing to the YouTube channel. To subscribe, search for Studio Ken on YouTube, click subscribe on the bottom right of your screen, and set a reminder. You can also watch Studio Ken on Diamond TV on Wednesday at 18:30 and on Saturday at 19 hours. Studio Ken, the home of Kennedy Gondwe, on YouTube.
Leprosy is a disease that terrified people in antiquity. And for those of a biblical disposition, the dramatic image of 10 lepers begging Jesus to rid them of such a deadly disease has formed the backdrop of many sermons. But beyond the Bible, not many people know anything about leprosy. And here in Zambia, not many people are aware that there's a hospital dedicated to alleviating the sufferings endured by those afflicted by leprosy. It's called Liteta Hospital, based north of Lusaka, and on its ground is the Leper Invalid Compound, where my latest guest on Studio Ken, Kathy Harding, has been providing care for the lepers for 27 years.
Hi, my name is Hope. Enjoy all those great interviews on Studio Ken, but to watch, you need to subscribe, so hit the button now.
Kathy, welcome to Studio Ken.
Thank you very much, Kennedy.
Your work around leprosy in Zambia has drawn the attention of Her Majesty, the Queen, who in 2002 conferred you with an MB. Tell us more about yourself.
Well, I came back to Zambia, as I say, 30 years ago, and I started working not with lepers, but with the poor, because that is my life's work. I just happened to stumble upon somebody who worked in a leper colony, and I said, I didn't know there was leprosy anymore. And she said, yes, I'm actually working there, but I'm all by myself. And so I went along with her one day, and I thought, oh dear, this is really terrible. So it was only on the International Leprosy Day that my husband at the time, he said, why don't we go out there and take some gifts to the lepers? And that was really how it all started.
What attracted you to the poor, and what made you to leave them and concentrate on leprosy or lepers?
Well, let's say ever since I was 4 years old, because I grew up in Rhodesia, Zimbabwe as it is now. So I grew up with the poor, and it was the convent, the nuns at the convent, that actually brought my attention to the fact that we needed to be supporting the poor. So I said to my mother, I have to take my clothes to the poor children. So I took all my best frocks out of the cupboard and rushed off to the school with the clothes. I think that was the start of it.
Your parrots are
Yes.
with now, I can hear it.
Sorry.
No problem. Let's carry on with the interview. How do you know that someone has got leprosy?
I wouldn't be able to tell, because it's very difficult to detect it. Generally, a person will perhaps have a mark on the arm or on the leg that looks like noughts and crosses. When you're playing noughts and crosses, you have the diagonal and the vertical lines. And then into that same area, it becomes numb. Because as I said to you initially, leprosy attacks the nerve ends. So that area will become numb. Then another area where they can get leprosy is swelling in certain part of the body. But it takes a leper generally to see leprosy in a fellow. That person will then go to a witch doctor before he'll go and see a doctor, a medical doctor, by which time the leprosy is taken a hold.
And what are some of the experiences or stories that you've heard that witch doctors have told those that are going to consult them?
Well, first of all, the witch doctor needs money. So they go and they get the money, and then he does whatever he does, throws his bones, and then tells them that the leprosy has been placed on this person by someone also doing witchcraft over them. So they might put an innocent person in danger by giving the wrong information and saying that it was that certain member of your family that didn't like this one, So very often then someone will put a juju on that person, and as you know, you put juju on somebody and they will succumb to whatever juju you've put on them. Either a heart attack or drop down dead or get very ill for no reason at all. It's all in the mind.
What has been your experience of working with lepers?
When I first started 27, nearly 28 years ago now, oh, they were a rebel. They were a bunch of drunkards. They were dirty. Nobody cared about them. They had wounds that were terrible, terrible wounds. And I was so shocked to see that they were so neglected. And it was actually my husband, he's now gone to be with the Lord, but it was my husband who said, look, I think God is bringing you to the lepers now. And so I started working there with my 3 colleagues we'd now formed a charity here in Zambia, National Agenda for Social Advancement, caring for the poor. And so the 4 of us got stuck in. And we worked together for about 3 years, and then each of them went and did their own charity work. But at that time, the wounds of the lepers were terrible. I won't go into any details. Because, I started bathing their wounds and putting imbrication on and bandaging. And I think my first horror experience was when I took the bandage off this leper's leg, and my hands were just full of maggots.
That was here in Zambia?
That was here at Luteta, yeah. Mm-hmm. Of course, I didn't realize at the time that in actual fact the maggots were cleaning the wounds. So they were actually good for the wounds, but for somebody who was quite new to it, it was a little bit hairy, a bit scary. But I got so used to it, and I think the big change came when I was doing the wound of a leper, and this woman said to me, but you're touching me. And so I said, well, why shouldn't I touch you? She said, but even my relatives wouldn't touch me. I was an outcast, and here you are looking after me and bathing my wounds. In those days I didn't bother to wear gloves either. So it was this physical contact that just astounded the lepers. And we just became one big family.
You use the word outcast there.
Yes.
Why does society treat lepers mostly as outcasts?
I think a lot of it is ignorance, because I've been working with them for all these years, and there's no ways that I'm going to get leprosy. I mean, most of them, of course, are now leper invalids, but some of them do still have what is called the contagious part of it.
Who are invalids?
The invalid is the leper who was once contagious. He's not contagious anymore, but the effects of the leprosy have caused him to become an invalid. They lose their hands, they lose their feet, they go blind because leprosy attacks the nerve ends. And so it's a myth that your fingers drop off and your toes drop off. That is a myth. They don't, actually.
What other myths have you come across?
People think that if they touch a leper, that they're going to get leprosy. If they go even into their orbit, they think that the air that they're breathing will contaminate them. It's ignorance. It's total ignorance. And it's very sad because they are very, very beautiful people. I mean, with these people, when they have nothing, literally nothing, they never ever complain. Sometimes I have to drag it out of them. Are you in pain? And they might say yes. And I say, well, why don't you tell me? I don't want to worry you, Mummy. So that's how it goes.
Do you think stories of the 10 lepers in the Bible help in hindering the understanding of leprosy as a serious disease amongst people?
Yes, I do. I do. Because I often hear that only one leper went back to say thank you to Jesus. It stays in the mind of people. If only perhaps in the churches they could use that as a forum to bring into an awareness that the 10 wanted to be whole like their brother. unfortunately, the 9 were healed, but didn't go back because perhaps they didn't know any better to go back. But 1 did. And if only the pulpit could emphasize on the 1 that did and not allow people to be thinking about the 9 that didn't go back.
How do you debunk some of the myths surrounding leprosy?
Just go with it. Stop looking at them as different from yourself. And if you look at me, I don't look at a leper as being any different from myself. They're just people that we should respect. And I think with a lot of my work, even some of my friends here in Zambia, they don't want to talk about it. So if I'm out socializing, I never talk about my work.
But
Never.
it's not exactly easy to convince an ordinary Zambian, I would assume, to get involved in the area that you've been involved with for the last 27 years.
I don't think, if I can put it that way, I don't think the ordinary Zambian is actually afraid of them. It's the other people,
Which people?
the whites. I have to be honest, it's the whites. The Zambians, I don't have a problem. They mix with them. Sylvester has never had leprosy, but he works cheek and jowl with me, with them. And I have several other people who come along. They're all Zambians, meaning brown. I have, before COVID, we get a lot of visitors from overseas. They always want to come, especially the Americans. The Americans are not worried about the leprosy. They just say, oh, have you got leprosy in Zambia? And someone will say, oh, go and see Kathy Harding. Then I get a phone call and say, I've got a visitor from America. He's never been in a leper colony. Can he come with you? And this happened on one occasion. This Pastor Troy from Jacksonville. And he came, and I was doing my medical under the trees in our New Jerusalem Kacheli village. And he said...
That's a facility that you run.
That I'm now involved in. And he said to me, but you need a clinic. So I said, oh, Pastor Troy, I have all my patients under the trees. I'm quite happy. No, Kathy, he said, when I go back to America, I'm going to build you a mobile hospital. Sure enough, he did. At first I thought, oh, that's tall talk. Too much talk, not enough action. But 18 months later, I had a phone call from him to say, I'm shipping your field hospital. And it's just like any field hospital that the Americans use, the blue berets they use in the field. And it arrived.
Not in any way being racist, but you referred to the other people not being as keen compared to the local Zambians, the blacks. And I must emphasize, we're not being racist.
Yeah.
But why do you think there's that reaction from them?
You mean
The whites.
Because it's ignorance. You see, the African is used to poverty. He's used to seeing people in a worse situation than himself. And they don't look down on one another. But it's just different.
Is it a disease of the poor? Is it a relationship between poverty?
No, it has nothing to do with poverty. It's amazing. I used to think it was, but it has nothing to do with that, because when I first became involved in it, I did say, oh, this must be from poverty. And the medical officer who happened to be with my husband and myself in the invalid compound, he said, Kathy, have you been into Soweto Market? Have you seen the filth and the deprivation there? We would be pandemic if it was through filth and poverty. No, it's an airborne disease. It's related to TB. It's very difficult to try and explain. It's just an airborne disease. I think, it's like with cancer. We've all got cancer cells in our bodies. I think if I was talking to perhaps a medical doctor on leprosy, he'd say to me, actually, somewhere in your body there is a little gene that's holding leprosy. Something just triggers it off and away we go.
And you can find it in developed countries in the Western.
Yes, yes. There's. I don't want to be specific because I don't have factual information, but I know in England there are a couple of places. Scotland, there's one, and India, of course, has got leper colonies. But of course, there, I mean, the people are really cared for by the Indian government, by the people, and the Indian government has made facilities for these people to become self-sufficient. Here you'd say, well, Kathy, what about your lepers becoming self-sufficient? These are invalids that have got no hands. I mean, but you know, they can eat with just this pot here. And they bath themselves, they wash themselves, they do all that for themselves. So you can't really say that they would have any other reason to not be where they are and helping themselves.
Why do you think there's so much ignorance around leprosy?
I think it's a taboo. I think, as you said, it goes very much back into biblical times. You see movies where there are lepers and they've got bandages all over them and bandages all over their heads. So people imagine that there are these monsters, whereas they're just ordinary human beings that just happen to have the wrong disease.
You referred to the Lord having called you to work with lepers.
Yes.
Tell me about the satisfaction, the fulfillment that you get from doing work around lepers. Not so many people would have such a calling.
Well, it is a calling. You can't do it in your natural strength. You can't. I mean, I'm amongst them every single week, whether it's cold, whether it's hot, whether it's raining. I'm there because I feed them every week. And I bind up their wounds and I supply all their needs except the fresh air that they breathe. Otherwise, I do everything for them. So this calling, I think God just took me there and He just said, this is for you. So that's what I do and I love it. I love my work and I never tire of it. Not that I'm looking for satisfaction, it's just part of my life.
So, in a typical day that you've done something that brings so much fulfillment to you,
Yeah.
what is it that you'd be doing for you to go back to bed and say, today has been a very productive day?
I don't really look at it like that.
How do you look at it?
It's just part of my life. I don't think, gee, Kath, you've done well today, and pat myself on the back. I come home if I've got a problem. I take it to the Lord, but I don't go to sleep with problems. With the lepers, I really don't go to sleep with their problems. I deal with them as best I can, and I find ways and means to support their needs. I have friends who support me. I mean, for instance, I have a friend in Sweden, and he sends out items, mainly medical stuff, and he's got groups of elderly people in their 80s and 90s making bandages, and then he sends them in these big banana boxes. And these bandages I use for the lepers because nobody else gives me bandages. And I don't have that kind of money, you know, bandages are very expensive. And then the Catholics here, in various Catholic organizations, they're very, very productive and constructive when it comes to the poor. And so my right-hand man, Sylvester Mwali, he's been with me now 18 years. He goes around to the churches and he speaks to them and appeals on our behalf. And I get bottles of Savlon, lots of bottles of Savlon, because that's the best that we find for cleaning their wounds and bathing their wounds. And so that's how we just manage.
How much is your monthly expenditure?
Oh, no idea. I just go along with it. And somehow the money is there. I have wonderful support from Zambia. They are the largest abattoir in Zambia. They have been supporting my work now for 25 years. I get free meat every week, free eggs, free milk, free yogurt, and I distribute it not only to the lepers but to other organizations that I'm involved in.
You've been working in this field for the last 27 years, and I would assume that the energy levels are not the same. What next for you in as far as the fight against leprosy is concerned?
Well, what we've done, we've established the New Jerusalem, Kacheli village, where I've built a school for the healthy children of leprosy, because we just felt that we needed to take the healthy families out of the leper colony, put them in a new environment so that the stigma of leprosy can die or stay in Lateta. We've been very successful on that. We don't have any leper children in our school at all, and we've actually opened up the whole school now to the 10 communities around us.
What is it that you would tell Zambians or people to know about leprosy?
I think what I would say is look at somebody in the eyes of the way you look at a healthy person, that there's nothing wrong with them. They've got maybe a disease, but it is not infectious. Yes, it's contagious, but not infectious, which is very important. Which means that that person can have some sort of liaison with the leper, but don't allow it to affect you as being a deadly disease.
If you were to meet President Edgar Lungu today over lunch, what would you tell him about leprosy?
I would say to him, Your Excellency, I've been living cheek and jowl with them for 27 years, and I'm as healthy today as I was before I went there. I would like you, as our president, to go and visit them and get to know them and see how beautiful they are.
On that note, I would like to thank you very much, Kathy, for agreeing to be on Studio Ken.
Thank you very much, Kennedy. I've enjoyed your company. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Hope. Enjoy all those great interviews on Studio Ken, but to watch, you need to subscribe, so hit the button now.